Alright, welcome back to part 2 of the MTG Arena set review of the white cards for M20. So first we have Ancestral Blade. In Constructed this seems too weak, but in Limited this seems pretty good. Basically a Grizzly Bear that comes with an equipment that equips for 1 and gives +1/+1 is a pretty good deal. So seems like a very nice limited tool. Next we have Angel of Fatality. The 3-cost 2/2 flyer, and if you have 25 or more life, it's a 4/4 flyer, and in addition, if you gain life, you gain that much life +1 instead. So there's the obvious combo with the 2-drop from part 1. That means you play the 2-drop, then you play this. If you haven't taken any damage, which is kind of tough in a shock duel world where mono red and stuff are a thing, but technically if you haven't taken any damage, you get a 3-mana 4/4 that also happens to gain you 5 life effectively by triggering your 2-drop, and then if it dies, gets your token and so on. But this just seems too unreliable and fragile for Constructed. But in Limited, this seems like a pretty good card. Like a 3-cost 2/2 flyer for 3 is already very solid, and then having the chance to get this up to a 4/4 and gaining extra life is pretty strong. Next we have Apostle of Purifying Light. We're getting some more like old school type Hoser cards again, like protection and stuff, which we haven't seen that much lately, so that's kind of cool in a way. Bit of nostalgia. So yeah, this is a sort of hate bear that's a 2-cost 2/1 with protection from black, and in addition it can host some graveyard stuff by exiling a card from any graveyard for spending 2 mana, which is not irrelevant in a world where we have Commanded Red Horde and a couple of other minor options. So it could even be interesting and Constructed, but at least a very solid limited card. Next we have Deceit Decree. I'm a bit surprised by this card in a way, because they kind of wanted to move away from these like generic color Hoser types in design a couple years ago. I didn't really like them, but we're getting some of them back, although they are a little less sort of toxic and hostile as some of the older ones were, and not as punishing. This is just basically like a very flexible removal. You get to exile target creature or planeswalker if it's black or red, and then you get to scry 1. It's not even an instant, so it's a very solid card. Seems like a nice sideboard card in the current climate, especially because it also deals with something like Arclight Phoenix. But and obviously it's good against Red Horde decks in a way, at least if they are black and red heavy enough. They're usually not red, so against Red Horde decks, while the exiling is nice, there aren't that many like good planeswalkers that you can hit with this. So it's not that great against most Red Horde decks. But yeah, it's kind of a nice card to exist. Next we have Eternal Isolation. Basically a different take on Reprisal. It's a sorcery instead of an instant, unlike Reprisal, but instead of destroying the creature, it's put on the bottom, which means it is sort of a pseudo exile effect against stuff like Dread Horde and other ways of recursion. All in all, bottoming it can be still kind of a downside, but yeah, all in all it's a pretty nice tool to have for white, given that white usually has to heavily rely on enchantment-based removal, which then can be blown out by the opponent, and having like a 2-cost removal for big threats seems nice, and seems like an interesting tool for something like White Weenie, for example. Then we have Fencing Ace, just a random reprint, nothing special for Constructed, I would say, and in Limited, I mean, it's a 2-cost 1/1 double strike, which makes for a pretty solid 2-drop at the very least. Next we have Gauntlets of Light, another pretty underwhelming card, not Constructed playable by any means, and even in Limited it seems kind of expensive. But yeah, it gives +2 toughness and lets your creature deal combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. I mean, I guess you could technically use this on opposing creatures as well to turn like a high power, low toughness creature into as an effectively lower attack creature, but the toughness has to be pretty low that after adding plus 2 toughness, it's still like a non-threat, so that seems super fringe. And the fact that you can untap the creature for like 3 mana is also not that great because it's pretty expensive and situational, so even in limited this seems pretty meh. Next we have God's Willing. I mean, we had the like indestructible version in, I think, M19? Oh no, I think it was in one of the Ixalan sets. That gave indestructible and scryed 1 for white, but giving protection, especially with all the planeswalkers that you kind of want to protect from, is much better, and this seems like a great addition for the whole Boros Feather type decks, which have been on the fringes, and with more tools like this might step up the ladder a bit, so this is pretty great. And in limited, I mean, this is also a nice tool. Then we have Herald of the Sun, clearly not a constructed playable card. Artwork looks a lot like Storm from the X-Men with wings, really, with the dark skin and the white hair and the white glowing eyes and the gesture and everything. So yeah, they snuck an X-Men into M20. But yeah, in limited, a 6-cost 4/4 flyer that buffs your other flyers is still pretty strong, so in limited this seems like a fairly powerful uncommon. It's a bit small for the cost, but still really strong. And last but not least, for the second part, Loyal Pegasus is back. This time it's an uncommon. And yeah, it's a 1-cost 2/1 flyer that can't attack or block alone. But this seems potentially quite interesting actually for White Weenie, given that the White Weenie version we have these days is super 1-drop heavy, and this seems like a potentially interesting 1-drop. But in the end it might not make the cut because we have too many better ones. But it's something to keep in mind at the very least. And in limited, sure, if your deck is creature heavy enough and low curve enough, this can be a quite nice 1-drop. I think even if you miss the first attack. Alright, that concludes part 2 of the white cards already, and I'll see you in a moment with part 3, so stay tuned.